Welcome to New Possibilities. I speak truth to power without fear. Today I'm going to continue my discussion about Bill Cosby. And I just want to give you a warning. If you are a Bill Cosby fan, if you're a Bill Cosby supporter, if you are a Bill Cosby apologist, a Bill Cosby enabler, you may not want to watch this video. Because in this video I'm going to explain where I stand on this issue. I'm going to explain why I believe that Bill Cosby probably committed these crimes. So now that that is out the way, let's talk about this situation. Let's talk about these cases against Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby is accused of raping or sexually assaulting at least 50 women. And these are just the women that we know about. There are probably more women who have been abused by this man who just don't want to come forward at this time. I was on Facebook the other day, and one of my friends from college, who is now a distinguished professor, he used to teach at Spelman College, and he pointed out how there's a woman who taught there who was allegedly assaulted by Bill Cosby as well. So there are plenty of women who have not come forward and probably will not come forward. And that's just one example. So in order for us to understand the situation, we have to see that there's a pattern here. Bill Cosby, according to many of these accounts, he reached out to modeling agencies or acting agencies, and he pointed out to these agencies how he was interested in particular women. Under the guise of pretending to be a mentor, this man used his celebrity, his status, to prey upon women. This man was basically a sexual predator. According to many of these accounts, Bill Cosby drugged women. Some of the women, he gave them pills without their knowledge. He put drugs in their drinks, and he allegedly gave these drinks to them. And once they took the drinks and they consumed the drugs without their knowledge, they began to be incapacitated and semi-conscious, and eventually they would lose consciousness. They would not be able to move or talk in many of these situations. And while they were in that state, this man sexually abused them. Now, some of the women say that they didn't know that there were drugs in their drinks, and then others actually received pills from Bill Cosby. And according to those women, Bill Cosby would offer them pills, like, for instance, if they have a headache or they say that they're feeling stressed out or something like that, this man would offer to give them pills to relax them. And they trusted this man. They viewed him as some kind of mentor. And we all know the public image of Bill Cosby as America's dad and all that stuff. So these women would trust him when he told them that this will help you with your headache or this will help you relax or feel better. They would take these pills and end up unconscious, end up sexually assaulted, and discarded like trash. Now, those are most of the cases. Most of the cases involve women being drugged. But then there are also situations where this man just outright sexually assaulted women. He felt that he was entitled to have his way with their bodies, according to these allegations. There are at least 2 or more women who worked at the Playboy Mansion, or they were playmates. And this man actually, according to these allegations, just grabbed these women and forcibly kissed them and groped them. So now Bill Cosby faces lawsuits. He faces defamation lawsuits, and he also faces a criminal case in Pennsylvania. The defamation lawsuits are a result of statements that he made on media when faced with these allegations. Him and or his attorneys basically called the women who were accusing him of these crimes, he called them liars and tried to discredit them. And since their names were defamed, they filed lawsuits against him, which are still pending in court. And recently, a criminal case was opened against him just before the statute of limitations ran. And that case involved another victim of rape, Andrea Constand. And I will go into that case next. And the reason why that case was brought, according to the prosecutor, is because new evidence was available. Evidence that was discovered through a deposition. The deposition that took place in the civil case that Andrea Constand brought against Bill Cosby for the sexual abuse and for other matters as well. So in the criminal case, Bill Cosby is charged with aggravated indecent assault. The complaint accuses him of penetrating Miss Constand's genitals without consent. It also accuses him of doing the same while she was unconscious. Now, I read over the complaint. In the complaint, it points out how Andrea Constand was the director of operations for Temple University's women's basketball team, and she was introduced to Bill Cosby in her capacity as that director. Bill Cosby presented himself as a mentor and as a friend, and Miss Constand allegedly assumed that this man was a friend. She had been in communication with him. She's met with him, and she thought that she developed a friendship with this man. On 2 occasions, he made sexual advances toward her. She rejected those advances. And then in January or February of 2004, Bill Cosby allegedly invited her to his home to discuss her career plans, to discuss her future. She arrived at around 8:45 p.m., and this is all spelled out in the complaint. I will include a link to the complaint. I will include links to all the sources that I rely upon for this video. So she arrives around 8:45. She tells Bill Cosby that she's drained and that she's emotionally occupied. Bill Cosby goes upstairs and he returns with 3 blue pills. He allegedly tells her that these are herbal pills, and then he says that to take them, down them, put them down in your mouth. That's exactly what he says, according to Miss Constand. And then he urges her to drink some wine. She takes a couple of sips, and according to this complaint, within 20 to 30 minutes, she has blurred vision and difficulty speaking. And Bill Cosby allegedly tells her to lie down, and he assists her to the couch. She loses strength in her legs. She becomes dizzy. She's nauseous. Again, she has blurred vision. And she describes herself as feeling frozen, as if she's paralyzed. And at that point, Bill Cosby proceeds to sexually assault her. And I won't go into details about what he does. You can read that for yourself in the complaint. But he sexually assaults her, and she eventually regains consciousness around 4 a.m. in the morning. She notices that her sweater is bunched up and her bra is undone. And while After she gains her consciousness and leaves, this man offers her a muffin. Now again, originally, the police decided not to bring a case. I mean, she filed a complaint with the police. The prosecutor determined that there was not enough evidence at that time to convict Bill Cosby. Later, she brought a civil action. And in that civil action, Bill Cosby was deposed. And that deposition, in part, served as part of the reason why they decided to pursue those charges now. Now I'm going to talk about why I believe the allegations against Bill Cosby. And I've talked about this in another video, but I will talk about it here. The sheer numbers of these complaints speaks volumes to me. The consistency of these complaints speaks volumes to me. Now I know that the mere fact that many people have a complaint against somebody, that doesn't necessarily mean that that person is guilty. I understand that full well. But let's think about this situation. Is it possible that all these people are lying? Yes, technically it is possible that all these women are lying. But it is not probable. It is not probable that you would have close to 50 or more women coming together, conspiring together to invent a whole bunch of lies over a long period of time, developing lies that are very detailed in their nature. That's just not probable. It's just not likely. And the best type of excuses that have been that people have developed to try to explain away 50 women bringing similar complaints, those theories don't hold under pressure. They don't stand. And I'll explain that a little bit later. People have come up with all kinds of outlandish conspiracy theories to explain away these 50 or more women who have come forward with complaints against Bill Cosby. But I'll go into that a little bit later. So you have the sheer numbers, over 50 women. You have the consistency of these stories. And the consistency points out a pattern. If anyone knows anything about predators, about sexual predators, we know that these types of people have a MO, a modus operandi, a way that they carry out their crimes. They have a pattern of doing things. And that's what is here in this case, in these cases against Bill Cosby. Now, one of the most significant reasons why I believe these allegations against Bill Cosby is just his deposition alone. In his deposition, he admits that he obtained prescriptions for Quaaludes. Quaaludes that he never intended to take himself. Quaaludes that he actually admitted that the reason why he had them is to give them to women that he intended to have sex with. And here's what he said in his deposition. The attorney for Ms. Constand asked him this. He said, when you got the Quaaludes, was it in your mind that you were going to use these Quaaludes for young women that you wanted to have sex with? And Bill Cosby said yes. Plaintiff's attorney went on to ask Bill Cosby this. He said, did you ever give any of those young women the Quaaludes without their knowledge? Instead of answering that question, Bill Cosby's attorneys objected to the question, and they told Bill Cosby not to answer. They said, "Do not answer." That's a direct quote from the deposition transcript. And it's important to note that Ms. Constand's attorneys filed a motion in court demanding sanctions be imposed against Bill Cosby and his counsel because they tried to do everything that they could to prevent information from being provided in the deposition. They did everything that they could to make an absolute show or carnival out of a deposition. They objected to all kinds of questions when they had no legal right to do so. They obstructed. They did everything that they could to prevent Bill Cosby from answering the questions truthfully and honestly. So again, Ms. Constand's attorneys filed a motion for sanctions, a motion as a result of the attorneys preventing Bill Cosby from answering the questions. The attorneys constantly objected when they had no legal right to object, and they did everything they could to turn a deposition into a circus. So in this deposition, Ms. Constand's attorney also asked, "Have you obtained drugs, any type of drug that would have the same type of effect as Quaaludes from any other source since the time you got the Quaaludes and you were no longer in association with our client, Ms. Constand?" And Bill Cosby's lawyer again instructs him not to answer the question. He says, "I am instructing you not to answer." That's what Bill Cosby's lawyer tells Bill Cosby. Also, in this deposition, and this is very important right here, it deals with this whole question of consent. Bill Cosby describes his encounter with Andrea Constand using these words: "I do not hear her say anything. I do not feel her say anything. And so I continue, and I go into the area that is somewhere between permission and rejection, and I am not stopped." That deals with one of the primary issues in this case, and that's the issue of consent. He says that he is somewhere in between permission and rejection, but yet he continues. That means that he's not clear if he had consent to engage in this sexual conduct with Miss Constand. These are his own words. This is an admission. So all this talk about people saying, well, you need evidence. Well, his admission is a form of evidence. And the statements of all these women, those statements, their testimony, if admitted into court, would be a form of evidence. It would be a form of evidence. So when people say there is no evidence, they don't really understand the concept of evidence. Of course, the case would be stronger if there was more corroborating evidence, but testimony is a form of evidence. Admissions against interest are a form of evidence. Now let me go on to another area that's pointed out in this complaint that leads me to believe that this man is guilty of what he's been charged with. Bill Cosby acknowledges that he apologized to Miss Constand and to her mother. That's not even in dispute. Why would somebody apologize for engaging in consensual sexual activity? Why would somebody apologize for doing something that was not wrong? Why would somebody apologize if they did not feel guilty or responsible for wrongdoing? That doesn't make any sense to me. Also, it's important to note that Bill Cosby, when he was confronted by Miss Constand's mother about this sexual assault, he offered to pay for Miss Constand's therapy. He offered to pay for her graduate school tuition. And he actually offered to pay for Miss Constant and her mother to travel to Florida to talk about the issue. That's not the conduct of somebody who's innocent. Somebody who is innocent would not do all this stuff. This is before a lawsuit was filed. This is before all of that stuff. Also, I know that settlements are not an admission of guilt. And that's a typical provision that are included, a typical provision that is included in a settlement agreement. Usually say that there is no admission of liability. Usually they include some disclaimer clause of that sort. Right now, we don't know how much Bill Cosby settled for. But a settlement is an assessment. Usually people do not enter settlement agreements when they have no risk of liability. When there's no risk for liability, then usually people fight the case. They fight it vigorously. But here there's a settlement for an undisclosed amount. All of these things that Bill Cosby has done do not point to the conduct of one who's innocent. These things are more compatible with the conduct of somebody who has guilt, somebody who's done something wrong. Also, there's another point that I would like to raise as well. Another reason why I think that these allegations are probably true. And that's Bill Cosby's jokes. Bill Cosby has made jokes about Spanish Fly. And for people who don't know, Spanish Fly was or is some kind of concoction that is supposed to be some kind of aphrodisiac that people put in, women's drinks without their knowledge. And I don't know if it's some folk tale or if it's some kind of urban legend or whatever, but that's the concept behind it. It's some kind of chemical or concoction that's put in drinks that serves as an aphrodisiac to make it easier for men to seduce women. And that is very similar to the types of things that this man is accused of. He's accused of drugging women and sexually abusing women. So this man has done stand-up routines about giving women Spanish Fly, putting it into drinks. This man has done interviews on CNN talking about Spanish Fly. This man has even done an episode on the Cosby Show about barbecue sauce that serves as some kind of aphrodisiac. All of these things are consistent with a lot of the allegations that are being raised against this man. When you look at the big picture, It doesn't point to a man who's innocent. It doesn't point to a man who's being charged out of the blue for no reason at all. All of these things together point to the high likelihood that this man is responsible for these crimes that he's been accused of. Now, many people, the first thing that they say when they hear about these allegations is this. They say, why did these people wait so long? They say that as if waiting a long time alone, by itself, just the fact that a victim waited, that fact alone is reason to doubt everything that the victim is saying. And we just know for a fact that that's not true. There are all kinds of reasons why rape victims wait to report their crimes, and I'll go into that a little bit later. But first, I'm just going to read a couple of the statements or paraphrase some of the statements from some of the accused. P.J. Maston said that she told her supervisor at the Playboy Club about the sexual assault that was committed against her. And this is what that supervisor said. You do know that that's Hefner's best friend, right? Nobody is going to believe you. That's what one person told P.J. Maston when she told them about these allegations, about her allegations of being sexually assaulted by Bill Cosby. And then another woman, Jewel Allison, says, I was just too scared. I also had the extra burden of not really wanting to take an African American man down. Other victims pointed out how date rape wasn't really considered rape back then. Most people had the idea that rape was something that a stranger with a knife did. You know, that's the type of crime, that's the type of image that they had of rape. And also, many of the women cited the example of Andrea Constand. When she reported Bill Cosby's crime, alleged crime, there was a brief investigation and the prosecutor decided not to pursue the case at the time. So they pointed to that as an example of why they didn't press charges immediately after the crime took place. And when you look at the reaction of the public to these women, how the public is attacking these women, how they are victim blaming these women, you know, how they are calling these women every name under the sun, one can understand why people were reluctant to report this type of crime. You have the example of Barbara, I think her name is Bowman or Bauman. She told her agent about the situation, and she says that her agent didn't believe her. She went to an attorney. The attorney laughed her out of the office. So those are some of the reasons why many of the women did not report these alleged crimes right after they occurred or within a short period after they occurred. It's important to note that when you look at these rape situations, when you look at what happened with these women and their delay in reporting the crime, you have to consider that sexual assaults and rapes are rarely reported. They are not reported to the same degree that other crimes are reported. According to the Maryland Coalition Against Sexual Assault, it's believed that only 15.8 to 35% of all sexual assaults are reported. In addition to some of the reasons that I already explained, there are other reasons why people don't report rapes. Some of them view it as a personal matter. They don't want to share that information with their family or their friends or with the public. Some of them don't want to get the offender in trouble with the law. And on another website for the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network, they also pointed out that the majority of sexual assaults are not reported to the police. An average of 68% of assaults in the last 5 years were not reported. So those are some of the reasons why people don't report rape. And those, that's, the information about the statistics in terms of the amount of people who actually report these types of crimes. So there you have a context. You have a situation where most victims of sexual assault do not report their crimes. So for people to act so shocked and amazed that these women didn't report their crimes, these crimes that occurred earlier, the fact that they are acting all shocked just is an example of how they're just not aware of the reality that many people don't report these types of crimes. Now, some people have discredited some of these women who have brought charges against Bill Cosby or who have made allegations against Bill Cosby. And the biggest example that they cite is of Miss Goins. Recently, the LA County prosecutor decided not to prosecute Bill Cosby in her case. They dismissed that case for insufficient evidence because they confirmed that Bill Cosby did not attend an event where Ms. Goins alleged that the sexual assault took place. She said that the sexual assault took place at the Midsummer Night Dream Party at the Playboy Mansion. And it turns out that Bill Cosby was in New York at the time. He was not at the event. And also they found that there was video evidence, and that video evidence did not show Bill Cosby at the Playboy Mansion at the time. So for those reasons, they decided not to prosecute that case. And there are a couple of other examples that people have pointed out where there are inconsistencies or there are questions about credibility. And I would say that they probably point out about 5 at the most of the situations where there are questions of credibility. And they use that as some kind of basis to say that there is no validity to these claims and that these are all made up charges. I'm talking about all of these claims as a whole. And I think that that's ridiculous. I think that it is ridiculous to point out a few examples among 50 to try to discredit every single claim that has been presented against this man. They cling to these few examples and they try to use them as if they are the norm for most of these complaints when they're not. I'm sure that you have some people who see an opportunity, probably, and they want to latch on to this situation to profit. But for most of these women, I don't think that that's the case. I listen to them tell their stories on A&E. I listen to their interviews with New York Magazine. I listen to their interviews on uh, other networks and other news programs. And that's not the impression that I get. Some people have tried to discredit these women based on their criminal history, on some of these women's criminal history. And that's a typical tactic. I mean, that's what they do. They try to blame victims when someone is facing charges. They try to flip it and bring the attention upon the accusers instead of the accused. And that's to be expected. But the mere fact that someone has a record or they have committed a crime in the past, that doesn't mean that they are necessarily lying about allegations of sexual abuse. And that's part of the reason why I'm glad that these matters are going to the court so that the court can sort out these matters and so that the trier of fact can determine the credibility of these witnesses. And ultimately, hopefully, there'll be some kind of justice in these cases. Ultimately, the court will decide what happens with these cases. Now, in response to these allegations, many people have put forth conspiracy theories. And I just want to briefly talk about those conspiracy theories. The first one that many people have emphasized is this. They say that Bill Cosby was trying to take over NBC, that he was trying to purchase NBC, and that NBC officials or people in the entertainment industry are out to retaliate against Bill Cosby for trying to purchase NBC. That's what they actually want people to believe. And I'm going to explain why that makes no sense at all. Bill Cosby tried to purchase NBC, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was in 1992. And that was a failed transaction. That was a failed effort on his part. That happened over 20 something years ago, 24 years ago. And these people actually think that because of that failed transaction that happened over 20 something years ago, that NBC is going to be out against Bill Cosby based on that. Based on something that failed over 20 something years ago. That makes no logical sense to me. There are many black people who have bought media, people like Kathy Hughes who's bought radio stations. I don't see anybody trying to cook up some kind of allegations against her in retaliation for buying radio stations. It makes no sense for someone to try to conspire against Bill Cosby for something that failed over 20 years ago. That makes no sense to me. Also, someone put forth the idea that the entertainment industry is out to get Bill Cosby because he bought the rights to Little Rascals and because he decided not to ever have that show broadcast on television again. Now, that allegation has been proven to be false Bill Cosby does not own the rights to Little Rascals. But yet these types of urban legends just continue. People continue to believe this foolishness. Also, people have pointed out that Bill Cosby poses some kind of threat to the establishment because he made some speeches directed towards black people, because he held some meeting that was for black men only, that somehow he poses some kind of threat to the establishment when he doesn't. All this man did was basically lecture black people about personal responsibility. Personal responsibility and respectability politics don't pose any threat whatsoever to institutionalized racism and white supremacy. In fact, talk of personal responsibility absolves the system and places all the burden on the victim, on the black man and woman. It basically says that you are in your position because of your own pathology and your own shortcomings. That doesn't pose any kind of threat to the system. It doesn't pose any kind of threat at all to white supremacy. In fact, white supremacy loves that kind of talk. They love it when black people are lectured about personal responsibility. They love that. That's why you would have President Obama lecturing black men about being better fathers, lecturing black people about how to raise their children. The conservatives love that kind of talk. The establishment loves that kind of talk. So that kind of talk doesn't pose any kind of threat whatsoever to racism and white supremacy. So the notion that because this man gave some personal responsibility lectures, that somehow that made him such a big threat to the system, that notion is ridiculous. That notion is silly. Next, I just want to talk about a couple of more things before I close out. So people have basically used this Bill Cosby situation as some kind of litmus test for blackness. If someone opposes Bill Cosby, then their blackness is being called into question. And I think that that's ridiculous. I think that this situation is Bill Cosby's pound cake moment. Bill Cosby gave a speech that has been coined as being the pound cake speech. And in that speech, he talks about a black boy who steals some pound cake and gets shot by the police. And that situation turns into a civil rights case. And then he says, why didn't anybody ask why the boy stole the pound cake? Why don't people deal with the question of why the boy stole the pound cake instead of turning it into a civil rights case, basically? That's it in a nutshell. Well, right now, Bill Cosby, as Boyce Watkins pointed out, is having his own pound cake moment right now. This man is accused of raping and sexually assaulting over 50 women. And instead of really dealing with the allegations, instead of really thoroughly investigating the allegations or thinking about the allegations, people are turning this into some kind of civil rights case. You would think this was Brown versus the Board of Education. You would think that this was Trayvon Martin. You would think that this was Michael Brown, based on the types of racialization of this situation, based on the way that people are defending this man. This is Bill Cosby's pound cake moment. In all actuality, these people are not defending Bill Cosby from racism, because there is no racist conspiracy against this man. What these people are doing is they are enabling a sexual abuser. They are enabling a sexual predator. And they are enabling many people like Bill Cosby, because they are telling the world that if you speak out against someone who has abused you sexually, your name is going to be dragged through the mud. You're going to be called all kinds of misogynistic names. People are going to dig into your past. People are going to question your intelligence. They're going to question your sense of responsibility. They're just going to run you through the mud. So this blind defense of Bill Cosby only serves to silence other victims of sexual abuse. And when you see the reaction of these people who defend Bill Cosby, it's easy to understand why these women were silent for so long. It's very easy to understand. It is the strength in numbers that has given these women the voice to speak out against what Bill Cosby has allegedly done. When people are together in numbers, they feel that they have more power. They feel that they have more support, more inspiration. And that's part of the reason why there are such things as class action lawsuits. Because alone, a victim is very weak, especially against a rich, powerful celebrity who's famous. They don't have much power. Not much power at all, especially at a time when date rape wasn't even considered rape. Now, Bill Cosby is essentially, whether it's intentional or not, he is playing the race card without playing the race card by putting out a token black woman attorney, putting her out on television, defending him. By having this black woman defend him, you have all these black people rallying behind this woman, thinking that this is some kind of black cause to be fighting for. And by having a woman defend him, he's also providing cover and support, or a reason for women to support him and for women to question these allegations. So he is indirectly playing a race card by putting out this token black woman on television. This woman says that she doesn't want to litigate the case in the media, but she's all over the media. If you don't want to litigate the case in the media, why are you all over the media litigating the case? She is a PR token who's being used to defend this man, to prop up support in the black community, to prop up support from the black community, the same black community that Bill Cosby basically talked down to. The same black community that Bill Cosby mocked and made fun of. He's using this token black woman to rally that black community support. And people often talk about how Bill Cosby has made donations to black colleges. And that's a noble thing, to make donations to black colleges. But let's not get things confused. The fact that a man has made donations, that doesn't mean that he's not capable of doing what he's been accused of. In fact, one of my colleagues who went to Howard University with me years ago, who later went on to become a professor at Spelman University or Spelman College, he pointed out, and I won't say his name because I don't know if he wants his information to be out there like that, but he pointed out how basically Bill Cosby used his money to silence critics. He donated millions of dollars to Spelman, and he threatened to pull the money out. He gave the money to Spelman to buy silence. Spelman is a university, it was headed by a black feminist. What better way to silence a potential critic than to donate and threaten to pull money out? Also, it's important to note that someone who actually taught at Spelman, according to this professor, was assaulted by Bill Cosby. And that woman never came forward. So we have to take those things into consideration when people talk about how much this man has donated to universities. Again, a donation does not mean that this man did not do what they have accused him of. A donation should not buy our unconditional, blind loyalty to a celebrity. Now, I want to conclude by just talking about what I think about these cases and what's going to happen with these cases. Right now, the criminal case against Bill Cosby is moving forward. There's supposed to be a hearing on February 2nd. Apparently, defense counsel has filed a motion to dismiss the case based on a technicality. They say that the prosecutor had reached some kind of agreement with Bill Cosby years ago that they would not prosecute Bill Cosby if he agreed to testify in the civil case that Andrea Constand brought. And they're trying to use that as a basis to say, well, Bill Cosby cannot be charged for this crime because there was an agreement. And alternatively, what they're trying to do is say, well, if he has to be tried, then none of the testimony from the deposition should be admissible. So it's very possible that that criminal case may be dismissed on a technicality, not dismissed on the merits, not dismissed because the allegations against Bill Cosby are not true, but dismissed because there was some kind of agreement between the prosecutor, the prior prosecutor, and Bill Cosby. And the mere fact that there was such an agreement just points to the corrupt nature of the criminal justice system. That people are able to use their wealth and their power to influence whether or not a prosecutor brings a case. They are actually using their power to force a prosecutor not to bring a case and to actually agree not to bring a case. That wouldn't happen if he was some ordinary man. Do you think that a prosecutor would actually enter some kind of agreement of that nature? I wonder if such an agreement is even ethical, if such an agreement is even binding. And I'm sure there's going to be great uh, legal debate and discussion about this issue. But here we have a situation where justice may be denied because a corrupt prosecutor reached some kind of agreement with this alleged serial rapist. Now, even if this case is not dismissed based on the motion, and it's highly likely that it may be dismissed based on that motion, even if it proceeds and goes forward, unfortunately, in this age, people are blinded by celebrity. Also, when you look at the fact that Bill Cosby is an elderly man, he has disabilities, from what I understand. He's lost his sight. All of those types of things make him sympathetic to jurors. The fact that he is a respected or was a respected entertainer. America's Dad from Cosby Show. Those things may make him more sympathetic to jurors. Those types of things may make a jury inclined to dismiss the case or not to find him guilty. So we don't know what's going to happen with the criminal case. As for the civil cases, I think that those cases will probably settle just like his other cases. He's probably had more than one case where he's reached some kind of settlement with people. Those cases may settle, or there may be verdicts in those cases. I mean, he may be found liable, but I don't know what's going to happen. So those are just my thoughts about this situation, and I look forward to reading your comments and hearing from you. Peace.